I'll give you our little intro first, and then we'll give you guys the first trivia question. So welcome to our home buyer seminar. This presentation is built to give home buyers, such as many of you who are online, insight on purchasing a home now and in the future in light of what's going on with these global issues with COVID-19 and the coronavirus. My name is Guillermo Freixas. I'm going to be joined with my colleague a little bit later, Tayreen Nelson. I'll introduce her in a minute. We are part of the Riley Smith Group. We are with Berkshire Hathaway, EWM Realty here in Coconut Grove. I'm coming to you live from our little cottage on Main Highway, and Tayreen is going to be joining us from her house. Tayreen and myself, we have over 20 years of combined real estate experience. Tayreen has been a real estate attorney who practiced in this field for well over 16 years, and she's been a sales agent with our team for the last 6. I myself have been practicing real estate in Miami for the last 7 years as a sales agent, and I'm here to give you as much value as I can during these times, as well as Tayreen. So we know that the common emotion that people are experiencing right now is uncertainty, and that is leading to a lot of fear, mostly fear of the future. So what we have examined is the common uncertainties about real estate currently over the last 5 weeks. And at the end of our conclusions, as we will discuss today, is that the market will continue to appreciate, and home ownership now more than ever is more valuable and is the most rewarding asset that you can have. Since none of us have ever experienced something quite like this, we've spent hours, Tayreen and I, over the last couple of weeks researching and masterminding with some of the top real estate professionals in the industry. This includes some economists, some mortgage specialists, and some top real estate teams around the country. Not only to make sure that we know how to navigate any of the changes in the current market, but also to give our clients, you guys tuning in at home, all the necessary tools to manage the home buying process advantageously today in what continues to be historically one of the best times to purchase real estate. So we will introduce towards the end of this presentation our mortgage wizard at Femby Mortgage, Ed Wilburn, and we'll have him come in a little bit. But right now, I want to open it up for Tayreen Nelson. She's right there on the screen. How you doing, Tayreen?
I'm doing great, thank you. I completely agree with everything you said on your intro. The common thread right now is uncertainty among the buyers, but for various reasons, the reality is that we do have buyers that need to buy now and buyers that are going to need to buy soon after this all normalizes. So it's exciting that we have this opportunity to be able to bring what we normally do on a one-on-one basis with our clients to a bigger audience. So it's our first time doing it. We'll see how it turns out, but I'm excited about trying this out. And hopefully everyone likes the information that we put out there.
Yep. So, okay, so here we go. So first off, before I get this thing started, I'm going to throw out a little trivia question for you guys. Here it is. So what 2 cities in Miami-Dade County have their own numbered street grid that runs separately from the rest of the county? So you guys think about that, and I'll get us started on our seminar. The first person to answer it will get a $20 gift card to Flanagan's. So hopefully you guys can all see our presentation here. So the first thing that we want to talk about is what's changed in the real estate industry. As you could probably imagine, a lot of houses have come off the market. So we've had some sort of accessibility issues with some of these houses. What has been available or remains available is mostly vacant houses. Not just vacant houses, there's still some very motivated sellers, and we're taking all the precautions to go in there with masks and gloves. And we are showing houses that are currently occupied, but the vacant houses is what remains mostly on the market, and we're being very aggressive with our buyers and taking a look at some of those properties. Those properties are on lock boxes for the most part. In regards to accessibility, current inventory equals motivated sellers. If there is a seller right now that has their house on the market, they're motivated to sell. More often than not, sellers need to sell more than a buyer really needs to buy. So keep that in mind. And if you're a buyer who's looking now, it's a good time to get aggressive and work with some of these sellers that are very motivated to sell. We know that there's going to be restrictions on lending. We'll have Ed in here in a little bit to talk to us about what's changed, but certain categories have changed. I'm sure people are finding it hard to get 100% financing, as was the case not but 2 months ago. So the biggest thing that I think that we're struggling with and what's changed in our market is consumer confidence. there is a fear of the future. And the biggest question that we're getting, and Tayreen, you could nod your head and let me know, aren't we getting this all the time? Is the market going to crash? That seems to be the biggest question we're getting, right? People are nervous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a couple slides here, courtesy of our friends at Keeping Current Matters. Keeping Current Matters is a company that is run by a guy named Steve Harney. He is the #1 real estate economist in the country. And so we were fortunate enough to be on a couple of webinars with him. And he had showed us this slide where it shows what the top people in the investment world are thinking is going to be happening moving forward. So you've got a slide here that shows Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Morgan Stanley. And everyone is expecting a turnaround rather quickly. It's a V-shaped turnaround. So the only thing that we don't know is when things are going to open up. We're all hoping that it's probably going to be either at the end of this month, if not the end of May, probably the end of May, just to be extremely safe. But these are what the top people who are managing the biggest portfolios around the world are saying to expect within 2020 moving forward. So that certainly is going to, keep things moving positive. We know that right now we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, but hopefully as soon as we get through this, we're going to have some greener grass on the other side. Moving on to how this is going to affect the real estate market. As you can see in this slide, over the last 5 recessions, with the exception of 2008, where housing was the cause of the recession, we have seen home appreciation go up. So it's not where we're seeing like, if you see a volatile market, you usually see home appreciation go up because investors are taking their money outside of the stock market and they're putting it into real estate, a more safe, appreciable asset. So that's kind of like what's been happening here. You see 1980, 1981, home prices went up, 2000, slight dip in 1991, and obviously in 2008, the bottom crash. But other than that, we usually see home prices go up whenever there's any kind of volatility in the stock market. So right now is the best. So it's not about the best time. So the best time to buy is when it's your time to buy. When you've saved the right cash, when you're financing in order, when you have a good credit score and all the stars align, that's the right time to buy. But if you are looking for that sweetheart deal, if you are looking to take advantage and possibly, get in there when people are motivated and people are nervous and there's uncertainty, Warren Buffett always he's had this phrase where he says, if people are running away from something, run towards it. I would tell you, if you're a buyer who wants to be aggressive and wants to get that sweetheart deal, the time is now. What's going to happen if you wait, prices are going to continue to go up. And we're going to have a crowded marketplace once this thing blows over. All the experts are predicting that the market's going to explode once this coronavirus pandemic subsides. So that is what has happened in the market. This is how we feel it going forward. There are so many things about South Florida that make us feel good about what's happening in the future. So we'll go into those a little bit later. But just so you guys know, we don't see the market crashing, and all the top people are telling us that they see a bright future, especially in the South Florida housing market going forward. In 2008, after that crash, Miami and South Florida was one of the fastest to turn around, one of the best real estate markets to respond because of where we are, our location, our weather. We're a global target. We market our listings to the world. We're a top 10 luxury market worldwide. So we feel real good about the market going forward. So moving forward, this is our home buyers roadmap, and Tayreen is going to kick us off here. This is a presentation that we have with our buyers mostly on a one-on-one, face-to-face basis, but now because of the circumstances with the virus and the technology that's affordable to us, we are able to do it to you via this webinar. So Tayreen, kick us off.
Well, before I start, Guillermo, I think it should be really assuring to the buyers to hear that information. It might take them a little while to process it, and we're going to send them the slides, but I think despite us not having experience in events such as this one in our history, once you understand how the real estate market has historically performed after a significant event like those ones that you mentioned, it should help ease some of those concerns that the buyers who can take advantage of buying now, it should ease some of their concerns. So I think it's important for them, to take a look at those slides and see how those events have affected the real estate market. So now, as you said, so now we've actually gotten that out of the way. That's what's changed. Those are the only things that have changed, but the fundamentals are still the same. The fundamentals of buying and selling are still the same right now, which leads us to the overall purpose of our buyer's consultation, which is to simplify all of those moving parts of the home buying transaction. So, so our clients can process all of the information beforehand and be armed with all of the tools that they need to work alongside us and make really well-informed decisions as they're purchasing their property, whether it's for investment or their first-time home or, you know, upsizing, downsizing. So you've already got the slide up there. So it's a really simple slide that we created for everyone to take a look at and follow along that touches on all the main milestones of the home buying process. So I'll go ahead and start it off. My part's not that exciting, so bear with me, but I think it'll help a lot of home buyers that just have logistical questions on like how everything works once we start off. So the first thing that we do is the buyer's consultation, which is actually what we're doing right now for the first time to a big audience. So in a typical buyer's consultation, we'll dig deep into the buyer's wants and needs so that we have a really good understanding of what the buyer's goals are, because that's one of the most important things when we're building a relationship with the buyer so that we can effectively help them. And also during the consultation, I'll also set my expectations of the buyer, and I'll discuss with the buyer what expectations they have of me. And I'm sure that you do that as well.
I 100% agree. I think the most important part of this is to set not only expectations on what it is that you expect of me as an agent, but how are we going to communicate? Are we going to text? Are we going to email? Are we going to get on the phone? From 9 to 5, are you available for phone calls? So it kind of sets the standards of how we're going to move through our communication process in the transaction.
Exactly. And now we're going to have a few more expectations just because of we're dealing with the health issues going on. So we're going to have a few more expectations of all the parties involved in the transaction. So it's good to talk about all of those right from the get-go. And then that moves us quickly into the obtained proof of funds or the pre-qualification. This is the first thing that is required before we actively begin to show any properties. If you're a cash buyer, you must have proof of funds from your banking institution or your financial advisor that shows us and the seller that you have the necessary funds available to proceed with the purchase. So that will be for cash buyers. If you're not a cash buyer, then you'll fall into the second category, which means that you'll be obtaining financing to make your purchase. So the buyer's going to need to connect with the lender and have the current pre-qualification or pre-approval letter ready. Most of these letters, it's important to remember that they're going to expire between 60 and 90 days after they were first issued. And one thing now during this time period, I think if you have one that you received maybe 30 days ago or maybe like in late February, which would otherwise be a current pre-qualification letter, I would recommend checking in with your lenders and making sure that the parameters that they based your approval on have not changed, because they may have. So you don't want to start shopping around and maybe there was some change and they might change the amount that you qualify for or some other thing. So I would definitely check what would normally be a good letter if it was obtained right before all of this happened. And I think it's important to mention now that we're talking about pre-qualification is that there is a difference, even though we use the words interchangeably, between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval letter. A pre-qualification is a very cursory and a preliminary look at the buyer's financial picture. The actual pre-approval goes a few steps beyond that. And in this market, I think you probably agree with me that I would prefer my clients to take that step further, and I would ask them to get the pre-approval rather than the pre-qualifications that if they need to buy now.
I think this works two ways. I think even if you don't need to buy now, but you've got the time to get it all lined up and have the DU when this thing opens up, you might be competing on, if we have the kind of flooded marketplace that we're expecting, there's going to be a lot of competition on some of the better inventory. So if you're going against a cash buyer, someone who's borrowing less than you, to have that DU, knowing that you basically have your pre-approval away from your commitment letter away from the cash, that's very important. It's how you can position yourself to be in the race in a competitive market.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And Guillermo is saying DU. What he means is the lender's going to give him approval that's gone through document underwriting. So they use DU in short, and it's actually the process of them processing your required income, your debt information, including your W-2s, your tax returns. And Ed Wilburn from FEMB, he'll be able to talk more about how that works. But when a buyer has a DU approval, you basically, the only thing left for the bank to deal with is to review the purchase contract when we give it to them, appraise the property, and then fund the loan. I mean, that's my basic understanding of it, but Ed will be able to give us more information on how that works. But I think it's really important now to be ready to go, because we are going to have more buyers with cash because they're taking money out of the stock market. So we're competing with that. So I think
we can't stress this enough. If you're watching at home and you're a buyer, some people, they're so hesitant to get pre-approved. We got to go above the pre-approval. We have to go to the next step to be competitive.
Right, exactly. So once you have that, then you're going to go to the next phase, which is, I think everyone likes this phase, which is the more fun phase. So now you have your pre-approval and we know what your purchasing power is. Then what I do as your agent, and most all our agents on our team, is that we customize our property search based on your budget and the wants and needs that we have discussed. So the buyer is going to begin to receive email alerts via email. And depending on the urgency, they're gonna end up getting those alerts instantly so that they know the properties as soon as they go on the market, or much less more frequently if they're just still window shopping. If you can you pull up our website so that we can show them what it looks like? And
so I'm going to share the screen now, but those who are at home, so RileySmithGroup.com is where you would go to activate this website. And Tayreen, you could walk us through it and I'll chime in there.
Yeah, you can start it off and I'll just give them a little bit of information. So the buyers can do everything on our website. They're able to view all the photos, the property details, and I encourage all my buyers to use the team's website because the information there is real-time information that's imported directly from the MLS. So as opposed to a Zillow or Realtor.com, which is all over the place as far as accuracy of the listing status. So it really saves us a lot of time when they use our site. And our website is actually just as intuitive and just as easy to use as those other sites. And most importantly, I think, is the communication between the buyer and the agent, because it's going to make it just so much more effective for both of us. Because if you can show them like the things you can do on the website and the features that it has, you'll see there he pulled up the properties, and show them maybe how to favorite the property, how to compare features, calculate mortgage, and compare schools. I think those are the main features.
As I go through the top here, everything that I do is going to tag it, right? So I can actually just save this search right now. Coconut Grove, up to 1 million, under 600, that has photos. So you can go ahead and save that search, and anything that you do here is going to create a tag, so it helps you to save it. Also, if we were to have you on a search, we will send you an email with all of these listings. But either way, the user can use it on their own. So if it's 8 o'clock at night and you put the kids to bed and you wanted to take a look at some properties, you can go on to the Riley Smith Group website and search for properties. So here on this listing, you'll have all of the stats on the side, how many beds, square footage, and then just more details, more pictures. Very enhanced, gives you all the information that you need up to the school zones, right? So here we have the schools, which is a great feature. We know that schools are a driving force in our real estate market. And
yeah, it's going to give you the assigned school and also any of the charter schools or any of the private schools around there, and it's going to rate them. I think it's called greatschools.com or something, but it gives them a rating, so it's good to have.
Yep, and then through here, you can communicate with your agent much quicker. So if you come down here and you have a question, you could just put your name, your info, interested in this property, or if you have a question about it, you could send it. And now, because of the situation with the virus, most of the listings have a space for video tours and chats. So you could talk to your agent while you look through video properties. Also, a monthly mortgage calculator here, so you can figure out what it's going to cost you monthly for this particular property.
Right. And then did you show them the comparison feature?
So as you favorite properties, you have the opportunity to favorite them. And then they'll go up to your favorite section. And when you go here, I favorited a lot of properties that are off the market because this has been going on for a while. But I can go ahead and add this new property and that new property and this new property to compare, right? So let's just say I've narrowed down my search to these 3 homes. I can see here what checks all the boxes. It helps me kind of see property, you know, side by side. This is one of my favorite features. So I don't know that you can do that in a lot of these websites. And if you can, some of the properties that you're going to see are just not available. They don't update as quickly as ours does, as they're linked to the MLS and it refreshes every 59 minutes.
Yeah. And I think that feature is good now. I mean, most buyers, I think, that are going to buy now, because of this whole, the experience that we're having now, I think most of them are going to be really picky and are going to want to have certain things in the home that before maybe they would have been a little bit more flexible about, but that now they're going to be, that's one of like the must-haves that they must have in the home going forward, because they've experienced living somewhere where maybe they didn't have that one thing that they really wish.
I think now more than ever, people are going to know what they want.
Yeah, exactly. You know, all of us are thinking that way. Okay, so once we've narrowed down, if you can take them back to the timeline, once we've narrowed down the properties that for that particular buyer, we'll go ahead and start showing all these properties until we found the right property. And that takes us right into, once we find that property and the buyer has honed in on the property, I will review all of the comparables, discuss the range based on those comparables, and then we'll draft an offer on the property on the Florida Bar as-is contract, which is the one that we use here in our area. We'll negotiate all the specific terms of the contract based on what the buyer's specific needs are. And once all the parties have agreed as to the offered terms, it's executed and the parties are officially under contract at that point. So that's when the fun begins. And we move on to that second phase there. You'll see that little yellow section there. This is broken up into 3 milestones. So we have financing, inspections, and title and insurance. And these 3 segments will contemporaneously move and independently of each other begin moving forward once we're under contract. So one of the analogies that we use often to explain what our role during this process is that we're the quarterback of the transaction. So we're tasked with making sure that all the various moving parts are all progressing towards closing, which is the goal line for us.
Yeah, it's kind of like where we introduce the partners, right? So up until now, it's really us and our buyers. Yeah, there'll be some conversations with the financing, but for the most part now, everyone's working. Now everyone's doing work and we are in charge of making sure that everything is running smoothly. I like to analyze also, the analogy I like to use for us is also, we're like a wedding planner, right? The wedding planner is not supposed to let the bride know what's going on behind the scenes. So we want to make sure that we communicate what needs to be communicated and we can put out any fires, because when, if an inspector were to call our client alone and tell them what's wrong with the house, we would never get a deal done again. So we try to maneuver through all of the problems by quarterbacking this transaction with all of our partners.
Exactly, yeah. Well, we have to anticipate a lot. And I think the longer you're in this business, then the more transactions that you've experienced, you're gonna get really good at anticipating things that can happen and being able to have those conversations with all the different vendors to be able to sort things out before it gets to the bride, in your analogy. So the first thing I'll do, if Ed is our lender, whoever our lender is, I'll go ahead and send them the fully executed contract so they can immediately begin the process and underwrite the loan. And they can order the appraisal of the property. If there's a homeowners association or a condominium association, I go ahead and start obtaining applications and contacts necessary to begin the association approval process if it's necessary for that particular community. And at the same time that is going on, the title agent is given all the information, also gets a copy of the contract, and they begin to order the chain of title. They will obtain estoppel letters if they're necessary, surveys, and conduct the municipal and code lien searches to ensure that the buyer has that clear and marketable title. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So this is the quarterbacking we're doing. That title agent they'll ultimately issue a title insurance policy on the property to the owner and the lender after they've gone through their underwriting, and they will give you clear title to the property without any clouds that haven't been addressed or cleared. And then at the same time is the third phase, which is while the title and the lender are doing their part, the buyer is going to have the home professionally inspected. The inspector will normally have a report back to the client within 24 hours. Some are quicker than others, but it's normally a 24-hour turnaround time. The inspectors are going to do a comprehensive inspection, including a 4-point inspection that's going to cover the roof, the structure, the electrical, and the plumbing, and anything else that the buyer, any other additional inspections that the buyer wants inspected in the home. Something that, yeah, go ahead.
Such as, like, so what are the, because I always recommend to my people that always check the pipes of the house. If the house is on a crawl space, then it's not as important. But if the house is on a slab and it's got cast iron, they're going to have to break through the floors. So I always recommend to my buyers to do a scope. And obviously, or not obviously, because it's not that obvious to a lot of first-time buyers or even people who are buying a house for the first time in 5 or 10 years, is a septic tank, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, the septic, one of the ones that I recommend every buyer inspect its condition. And it's a separate inspector that comes in and does that. You don't want to miss the inspection on your septic tank, because the repairs and or the replacement can be costly. And many times the seller is not even aware of what the condition of the septic tank is. Remember, it's underground. So you want to have a professional come out there and inspect it. I'm sure you've had plenty of deals, as we all have had, that where the septic is an issue and we have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, it costs $500 roughly for a septic tank inspection, and then $20,000 if it has to be replaced. And it's a very messy job, right, Tayreen? Tayreen knows because she had to change her septic tank last year.
I did, yes. And he did an Instagram video on it. So, so now that we're talking about inspections, we should also cover some questions that we commonly get. One of them is that buyers often ask is, what happens if the buyer gets a higher offer while we're under contract and we're in this inspection period? And I mean, yeah, the buyer, sorry. The seller gets a higher offer. And the buyer should understand that during this inspection period, you basically lock in the seller. You have the unilateral right. You're the only one with the unilateral right to cancel this contract during this inspection period. So that's important to know.
So, okay, so for people who don't understand, unilateral means you can back out. The buyer can back out. Seller
They're the only ones that can back out. The seller cannot back out. So I think that's important. And another question that we do get is, when I back out, can it be for any reason, or does it have to be an inspection related reason? And you can back out for absolutely any reason. If you don't like the color of the house, if you just completely change your mind, something changed. If you're within that inspection period, you can back out for any reason without penalty. Your deposit, that good faith deposit you would have put in initially, will be refunded. So
yeah, and that's one of our biggest responsibilities as your agent, is to protect your deposit. So one of the things that we have within our team is a system in place to send notifications, not just to you, the buyer, but to the lender, to the title company, to the other listing agent, so that we make sure that everyone is abiding by our critical dates on our timeline. Our most important job is to get this to closing. The second important job is to make sure that if you decide that you want to back out within the time allowed, that your money is protected.
Right. Also, during the inspection period, if things are revealed that might be issues that the buyer didn't contemplate when they were making that offer, it is another opportunity to possibly renegotiate the deal at that time. So that's something important to know. We have basically that opportunity to renegotiate, and then if the appraisal comes back and it doesn't appraise, then that would be another opportunity to renegotiate the deal. So there's still, even though you're under contract at that point for a certain purchase price, there still might be a couple of other avenues to renegotiate the deal if it's necessary.
Right. So I'll reword that a little bit, because what I say to my buyers, so that they have an idea, we're going to negotiate roughly around 3 times. We're going to get the house under contract. That's the first time that we're going to negotiate the original, their original price, what we want to pay. We'll go back and forth. Then we're going to go through our inspections. If the inspections come back upside down, the buyer's going to ask for a credit. We're going to have to negotiate again. And then if the house doesn't appraise, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to make up the difference.
Yeah. And now, if everything is agreed upon and everything is satisfactory to the buyer, then they want to move beyond the inspection period, then the buyer gives that second deposit and the parties progress towards closing. Like this is moving forward. Now you've put that second deposit that could be at risk. But it's exciting because everyone's moving towards closing. And then finally, you get to that last little phase there of the diagram, which is basically your closing date. On that day of closing, what happens is the closing agent is going to get the funds they'll receive funds from the lender. They're going to receive any remaining funds from you, the buyer, and they're going to hold those funds in escrow. And once all those funds are received and the buyer and the sellers have signed their respective documents, the transaction is technically, well, it is closed. It's not technically, it's closed. And the buyers will get their keys and they get possession of their new home. And that, in a nutshell, all that information is the home buying timeline. So it's a lot of information and a lot happens during that time. So, but
so let me ask you a question, because I know that you recently got a property under contract. How are the inspections and the appraisals different now than they were 5 weeks ago?
I mean, everything that's the same. It's except that everyone is respecting everyone's space. In that case, the inspector, beforehand, I talked to the inspector in advance to let them know some things that are really important to the buyer that were inspected and that they're thoroughly inspected. They thoroughly inspect everything, but we make sure that the inspector knew in advance what it was. I normally would talk to them at the property face to face. But because we're going to have so much space between us, I figured it's better to have a phone call in advance so that they knew those things. And then also the seller had nowhere to go because of the stay at home order. So what we did was I had a really good listing agent on the other end. We just had her stay in one room until the inspector completed the rest of the home. Once he needed to go in that room, she moved to a room that was already inspected. And so we just kind of went with the flow, but everyone stayed safe. Everyone respected everyone else's space. And basically everything is the same. It's just we're adding that element of keeping everybody safe to make sure that we can move the process along with everyone staying healthy. I mean, no one wants to, get sick during this time. So, but yeah.
Well, as long as we're an essential business, we'll do it as safe as we can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's from everything we're talking about, it's very crucial, especially during a time like this, for you to have the right team to guide you through the process. And the team that I'm referring to is the agent, the lender, the closing agent, the inspectors. You want to have a really cohesive group of people that's going to work really well together to make the buyer have a positive experience from start to finish. Because, and I know you've heard this from many buyers that, they've worked with, maybe they bought a home in the past or even recent, or maybe not even close, but we're working with someone else in the past and it went so horribly wrong. We hear these horror stories, and our goal is for that not to happen to our buyers. We want it to be a very positive experience, especially for those first-time home buyers who are scared to death to buy their first home. And those buyers who just haven't bought or sold a home in a long time, they just kind of forget how the process works. And it's really good to have a good team that you're working with.
Yeah, you don't know what a bad title company can do to your transaction until you've had the worst one, right? So it's important that all parties are communicating, and we always try to put who we recommend in front of our buyers, not because none of us are getting kickbacks, but just because we're doing I call it the A-team. When I have my A-team on a transaction, I know that everything is going to run as smooth as it possibly can. And if there's an issue, we're going to be able to handle it calmly together because we've solved these problems before for many, many buyers. So yeah, well, thanks for walking us through that timeline. I actually have, and we'll send this presentation to anyone that wants it. We have your emails. Maybe we'll just send it to everyone. We didn't go over this. I have a copy of the contract here. So this was just something that Tayreen was going to queue up to go over where kind of like everything fits in terms of the timeline, because basically that buyer's presentation that we just did, that roadmap, is basically a 12-page contract made out in a diagram to help you kind of understand what's going on. This is basically a real estate contract in a form of a map. So with that being said, I'm going to talk, we're going to end this trivia, the first trivia question. So the first trivia question was, what two cities in Miami-Dade have their own numbered street grid that runs separately from the rest of the county? The answers that came in were Hialeah and Coral Gables, until it was answered correctly by our own Amy Herron. The answer is Hialeah and Homestead. So Amy Herron wins the first gift card. I will, before I introduce Ed, I'm gonna go ahead and type in the second question. The second question is, where is the highest point of elevation in Miami? And we're gonna go ahead and answer that after we get through with Ed. And I've got Ed's slide right up here. So Ed, can you hear us? We'll have to.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep. Perfect. Great. So,
all right, great.
Ed, you've heard us talk here for about 40 minutes. Certainly things have changed for us. I'm sure that you've got a lot of things that you can point out to us on what the changes are and what we can do to go around the hurdles that we're going to have now as we're trying to buy property during this pandemic.
Well, thank you for having me, Koki and Tayreen. First of all, I can't agree with you more in what you were saying earlier, when I think right now, if you are looking for an opportunity in the market that we haven't seen in some time, now is the best time. I actually spent some time today talking to clients and prospects, and several people asked me about the probability of a large amount of foreclosures hitting the market due to the pandemic. Luckily, we learned a lot of lessons from the Great Recession, and that will absolutely not happen at this point, because most buyers now have an opportunity to actually enter into a forbearance where they don't have to make their monthly mortgage payment for maybe up to a year. So there's no chance of any type of foreclosure induced crash, or there's no chance of a large number of properties hitting the market. So if you wanted to try to strategy to wait for that to happen, it's not going to happen. So now is definitely the time when there's a small window of opportunity, I think, in the market, while people are kind of sitting back. Maybe there are some fear out there about the uncertainty of some people's employment, but most of that is on the short term. So, and I want to emphasize one point. There have been changes. There's no doubt we've seen some things happen in the past couple of weeks that maybe we haven't seen before in some time, with some restrictions put on some programs that were available. Let's just say that the credit box up until this point over the past several years has been broadened, has been widened. There are more and more opportunities being added for people to get financing. We're seeing that credit box tighten down a little bit. However, it's still important to understand that financing is still available. As a matter of fact, up to 97% financing on conventional loans. Those guidelines have not changed. Government loans, FHA financing is still available. VA financing still available. So, most of the financing that most folks today in our communities use are widely available. So for now, it's still great, and it's a great opportunity to buy.
Okay, so so when you say the credit score has increased, can you give us an idea more or less like what you're seeing?
Yeah, so it's two things. So some of the maximum financing things that we did have 100% financing that's available, that's gone for now. It's been suspended. Credit score requirements on government loans, you used to be able to go down to like a 580 credit score if you're familiar with your credit score. Now you're probably looking at a minimum credit score of 640. So that does take out some segments of folks. And, on jumbo lending, it's a little bit more difficult if you're going to borrow over $510,000, which makes you become a jumbo loan. In that situation, the credit scores, we can still do them at 680, but not on a fixed rate. On a fixed rate, you're probably looking at above 720 now on a jumbo loan.
Right. Okay.
Non-QM lending, which were bank statement loans that had been recently introduced, or investor loans. If you're buying an investment property, just recently you actually didn't have to show income verification. The property only needed to appraise out. That's no longer available. So as you can see, it's just a few of the programs that are not available. But for a first-time home buyer right now, still plenty of options. And I think the most important thing you can learn.
The QM for people who don't know what a QM is.
QM is called a qualified mortgage. A qualified mortgage are certain rules that banks have to follow in order for them to be able to enforce the mortgage down the road. So the loans that are not following those guidelines are typically higher priced rates because the loan's basically riskier. So those are gonna be alternative documentation loans and things like that.
Okay, and then when you said in the FHA, how much is the FHA up to now?
The maximum FHA loan in Dade County is about $375,000. So, and it's going to also depend on the type of property. You can actually do an FHA loan on a condominium now, which most people don't know. You can do spot loan approvals where you used to have the whole building approved. You can now do it on any condo as long as it meets certain guidelines.
Okay. Fair enough.
I think all of these changes, Koki and Tayreen, I think the most important things are that you've got to plan early. I think that mortgage planning is more important now than ever. I think Tayreen pointed out that even if you've been pre-approved before, even in the recent past, within the last month or two, you may want to revisit that and just to make sure that the terms under which you were approved under are still available. And if they've changed, what does that mean to you and what does that mean to your payment? I think that's something you should definitely look at. You might want to plan to pay off some debts because right now the difference between, let's say, government lending, which is FHA and VA financing, versus conventional. In the past, actually, those rates were lower on government loans. Rates are actually a little higher on government loans right now. So it might be more beneficial for you to pay off some debt and qualify under a conventional mortgage. You might benefit a lot on that rate. And perhaps even adding a co-borrower or a non-occupying co-borrower. Sometimes people's parents, if they're younger and they're still, their parents want to help them, that's an awesome opportunity there. The parents don't even have to take title and they don't have to occupy the property. They can be what we call a non-occupying co-borrower. It could be any family member that can help you out. That might help your debt ratio be lower and help you get a conventional loan. And I think that's another awesome opportunity that you should explore. Now, especially with the differences in pricing for credit scores that have been implemented, it's more important than ever to get that pre-approval done, get some mortgage planner, get some mortgage planning done, and take a look at your credit score and see if there's opportunities to raise your credit score. And that's something that any good mortgage person can do for you. We can run a report. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do to get you from point A to point B. And we can even tell you what that means to you as far as your rate and all your options down the road.
I mean, yeah, I'm hammering this home to everybody. If you're not ready to buy today, it's still not a bad idea just to talk to a mortgage broker, talk to your real estate agent, talk to us, and start planning. Because I know a lot of people that had buying a home as one of their goals this year. We're still only in the first quarter. Things come the fourth quarter, who knows? I mean, we should at least be ready now to see what opportunities come down the road.
Oh, Koki, you and I both know that we've talked to people, a year ago that are just starting their actual home hunting process because they've been spending the time planning properly to make sure that they have all their ducks in a row, certain debts paid off. They've worked on their credit score. It really is a journey, and it can start, today. It doesn't have to mean that the finish line is next month. They don't need to be having to wait till their lease is going to be up in 30 days. If you're looking at a year or 6 months, it's the best time to start the process for sure.
Right. So maybe I can ask you a question. And if anyone listening has got a question, before I ask a question, I'm going to go ahead and award the second gift card to Monica Martin. So the question was, where's the highest elevation point in Miami? The answer was Coconut Grove. So Monica, send me an email and I will get you the Flanagan's gift card, and I will ask our third and final question, and then we'll open it up to questions for everyone who's on our chat. And this question is, What is the oldest landmark building in Miami-Dade County? So as that's happening, Ed, question for you from Anthony here. Are lenders hitting roadblocks with all the current safer at home restrictions when trying to get appraisers to properties? Even with a hold on, he's finishing up here. Even with a drive-by appraisal, can this affect the buyer's ability to obtain funding?
Well, right now on a purchase transaction, Fannie Mae and HUD have put out guidelines that do allow for drive-by appraisals or desktop appraisals when you know, the parties don't want to complete a traditional appraisal because of COVID-19 fears. So first of all, it's up to the parties involved in the transaction. So we're seeing maybe only, believe it or not, 20 or 30% of the people opting for a drive-by or a desktop appraisal alternative. Most of the people have decided that they can make amends, and they'll, you know, the appraiser be donning a mask, taking all the precautions, wearing gloves. They only have to be in the house for a short period of time to measure and take pictures of the inside. I think it's better, you know, in the long run for the appraiser to be in to do an interior inspection. I think you're going to get a better valuation of the property and a more accurate valuation. But if the same can be done, you know, with the next year appraisal using the photos that are available on the MLS and on other, on your website, for an example, is a great tool that appraisers can use to look at the interior of a property. So we are seeing those getting done. So we haven't had any deals so far fall through because an appraisal couldn't be done to be satisfactory to all parties.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, for the most part, we've seen all of our deals here in-house kind of close, even the jumbos. So I guess those things were kind of worked out before this thing started, but they're closing. We have a question here for Ed from Jose. The higher credit score, does that mean less down payment?
The higher credit score, less down payment. No, I think that, you know, let's take that question as a conventional loan or on a government loan. No, you know, you still have the same minimum down payments that you can have on both of those as long as you have the minimum credit score available, but it might affect the rate that you pay. So your rate could be different on a government or a conventional loan now if your credit score is lower than the higher credit score tranches.
Yeah. Okay, if anyone has any more questions, shoot them in here. So Ed, we listen to all of these economists, and one of the things that we're hearing is that for the most part, the reason why we're not going to have 2008 all over again is because there's great equity in all of these houses around the country. Can you corroborate that?
Oh, I would say that's for sure. You know, we also service loans, and in our servicing portfolio, the average loan to value, you know, of course we estimate that, and most of the loans that we service are government loans. So they started out at very high loan to value. So people putting down 2.5 to 3.5%, and some at 100% financing on VA loans. And our average loan to value now is like 70%. So, you know, I think that that's true, but I'm not that worried about the equity piece. I mean, although that is a saving grace, I think that that's one of the things that makes our entire real estate market very resistant to any type of, you know, let's say natural disaster, even like a hurricane or an earthquake or whatever that might be. That equity definitely holds us for the longer period of time. I think that based on what you showed on the screens, we're going to have a V-shaped recovery here. We're talking about we saw a quick drop in gross domestic product. You know, it supposedly is going to be returning with a vengeance, you know, when they open the doors. And I'm expecting to see, you know, everything come back pretty quickly, including employment. And I think that's the real key here. We have seen a couple transactions be delayed because the buyers during this transaction were on temporary, you know, they temporarily lost their job. A lot of them actually had their payments reduced, you know, their income, they took a pay cut so that it was better for all the people in their company. So they all agreed to take a pay cut to be able to maintain employment for their company. And so, you know, while that is going on, we can't use their otherwise full income. So we're having to wait. And so a lot of people are just signing extensions on the contract. So they're not even really wanting to cancel the contract on either side because, you know, they've gone this far with the transaction. They're just they're actually writing addendums and waiting to see how long it's going to be before they can be reinstated.
Well, great, because that was one of the questions by Jennifer here. She's asking that. They're coming in for you, Ed. So could you confirm if 20% down payment is a requirement now and lower down payments are gone for now? Question from Massimo.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, you can put down 3% on a conventional loan and 3.5% on a government loan, or 0% if you're a veteran. So those loans are still available.
Great. Tayreen, do you have anything for Ed?
No, I mean, I just think that it's important to note that, you know, Ed is one of the local lenders and he's one of the vendors that we use. So I think Ed can vouch for this too. It's really important, and Koki, to work with one of our local lenders, especially during a time like this when we're experiencing all these issues. I personally always tell my clients, if they can work with any of our local lenders, it's the best way to go, not the big, huge banks that are dealing with everything that they're dealing with now. So,
yeah.
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank you. I don't want to necessarily put a plug in, but I'll put a plug in for local lenders. But, you know, we are hearing and we are getting a lot of business from fallout from a lot of the larger lenders, whether it be even on a purchase or refinancing, that they're basically flooded with calls. I just had somebody today that said, listen, I really wanted to work with my bank. And I said, I understand. The rate was competitive. He called me back today and said, well, I've tried calling them for like 3 days and they haven't called me back. So I think that that's probably going to be the case in a lot of these situations now with most large lenders. They're just completely overwhelmed. So we're here ready to help. So if I can help any of you, please don't hesitate to contact me through Tayreen and Koki.
Yep. We're going to email this slide. I've got Ed's contact information in it. So in closing, you know, I'm going to tell you our tagline is to help everyone make the move of a lifetime. And we know these are extreme circumstances right now to try to get into real estate. But think about the future and think about what happened in 2008 and know that we're in much better shape. And South Florida recovered faster at that time than most markets. We have record low delinquencies, no subprime mortgage crisis, strong demand, low supply, low interest rates. It was a perfect storm for buyers. So hopefully after this V goes back up, this V-shaped recovery that we're expecting, we can all get back to buying and selling real estate. So Ed,
I think you have one more question there.
Yeah. Oh, who was it?
It was Daphne.
Oh, yes.
How are the interest at the moment for Ed? Did you see that?
What was the question?
How are the interest rates at the moment?
Oh, interest rates are still great. They're still at all-time lows. I mean, you're talking, if you have a very good credit score, only putting down 5%, you're going to be in the low 3s on a 30-year fixed rate loan with no points and no origination fees. So, you know, rates are really low. It's a great time to buy. You know, compared to, you know, only a few months ago, you know, rates were much higher. They were up in the mid 4s. So we've seen rates take a tumble here. So it's a great opportunity.
Fantastic. So, all right. So if you guys have any questions, you can find us on social media. I got me and Tayreen's Instagram there. You can hit up Ed. I'll send you his information. I'm going to announce the winner of the last trivia question. The question was the oldest landmark building in Miami-Dade County. And the answer was Cape Florida Lighthouse in Key Biscayne. So congratulations, Jessica Gonzalez. Send me an email or find me on Instagram and we'll get this thing mailed out to you. On behalf of the team, on behalf of Riley Smith Group, Ed, Tayreen, anything you want to say in closing?
No, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Guillermo. It was really good to do this. I mean, it was our first time doing it, and I'm happy that we did it and brought it to a bigger audience.
All right, we'll get more content out to you guys as this thing goes on. We'll keep you updated. Any other questions you have, please bring it. We're happy here to help you guys figure out what your next move is.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Bye.